I'm Alex Hardy. He's Nick Ferguson. We are up to our final installment of the NFL previews, and good time for that, Nick. The NFL season kicks off tomorrow. 10-year NFL safety Nick Ferguson at Nick Ferguson _25 on all socials. We got the AFC North, one of the best divisions in football, always, whether the teams are good or not. So, Nick, when we dive into our last preview here, what's going on, my man?
It's all about the black and blue division. Man, both your shoulders and your backside are black and blue when you play in this division.
We'll start black and purple. The Baltimore Ravens, the reigning division champions, they get themselves not as far. They didn't get to an AFC championship last year like they did 2 years ago, but another MVP for Lamar Jackson. An incredible, just unbelievable. Was it 41 passing touchdowns, five interceptions, added more touchdowns on the ground. Again, not going to have that debate with Josh Allen, but truly one of the most outstanding performances for an individual and getting the rest of the offense going. And yet here they are flamed out in the divisional round of the postseason. So, Nick, is this because they dropped some games that they needed, missed that first round bye? Like, tell me what Baltimore did this past year and the reason why, they kind of fell short of these high expectations that come with having, I don't know, a 3-time MVP under center.
Well, several things were the reason why the Baltimore Ravens ultimately did not get to the Super Bowl. Obviously, we watched them lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, a game that they should have won. And for me, I got to go back to the offensive play calling with Todd Monken. When you have a guy as talented as Lamar Jackson, you got to allow him to do his thing. And I'm not calling for design quarterback runs, but he's a threat to take off with the ball. That plays in the mind of defensive players, and sometimes it's like a moth to a flame. They're drawn to him, which would open up passing lanes down the field. So that was one of the problems. And then getting the stops when you needed them. Kyle Hamilton just got like a massive deal from a safety standpoint. Yeah. And, he played well leading up to some of those playoff games, but they need him to play at a top-notch level. We're talking about a Ravens defense that they're going to have to create some turnovers. That means playing more man coverage, getting after the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterbacks. But once again, can the Baltimore Ravens hold up in the back end? We know what the offense is capable of doing because you got Isaiah Likely, you got Mark Andrews, you got Newt Hopkins, and you got Zay Flowers, just to name a few. And then you have Derrick Henry, who is Mr. Blunt Fort Trauma himself, and then Mr. Exciting and Lamar Jackson. So this is a team that is still one of the scarier teams in the league. When you probably look at all 32 teams, everyone's still probably going to talk about Kansas City because they find ways to win. Right. But this Baltimore Ravens team, man, I really think that this may be their year to really push and get themselves in that AFC Championship game.
Well, if not now, then when, right? You talk about that secondary, and the second half of the year was so important for them because they ranked dead last, 32nd for the first 8 weeks of the season in terms of yards allowed through the air. They had a complete revolving door at corner. Marlon Humphrey got Humphrey. Yeah. Humphrey got healthy, and the back end, led by Kyle Hamilton, really put themselves back on the standard that they were supposed to be. But a real Jekyll and Hyde that just, they dropped that game to the Raiders. They lost back-to-back games. It ultimately cost them, it's a game of attrition, and not having the extra game or two in the win column meant that they had to go on the road. Now, Mark Andrews could have caught the ball in the end zone, and maybe we'd be having a different story with the Chiefs game. But it's just so unfortunate that, we just talked about this with the Buffalo Bills and the AFC East episode, and the Ravens too. We just saw the Chiefs at their weakest, and they still went 15-1, and they still made it to the Super Bowl. So if not now for the Baltimore Ravens, then when? And look, I don't know what else there is to say considering just how dominant they've been at times, but health is a concern, and that back end of the secondary has been a problem as well. You want to talk about a problem area on just the secondary or an entire defense? Because that might be what's holding the Cincinnati Bengals back this year, Nick. One of the most electric offenses with one of the quarterbacks who's asked to do more than anybody else at that position. And the Cincinnati Bengals missed the postseason last year. What happened?
Well, I mean, you said it in a nutshell. The fact of Lou Anarumo, his defense, they couldn't really stop a nosebleed, which put an immense amount of pressure on the Cincinnati Bengals. Just imagine, here's a team that's averaging about 30 to 38 points a game, and I mean, some of their games end up being like a shootout. And all they need is their defense to get a couple of stops, and they were unable to do that. And especially knowing as though your offense had a propensity to score as many points as they did, that means guys like Trey Henderson and all those other guys, don't worry about the run. Just get upfield and sack the opposing quarterbacks. And that's something they could not do. Their biggest issue was giving up explosive plays. I watched as Bo Nix dropped 2 bombs to Marvin Mims on that secondary. If the Bengals can slow people down, it gets them an opportunity, because when you talk about Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, I mean, some of the better skilled players in the league, and Joe Burrow should have been in that MVP conversation last year, and by all accounts, my accounts, he should have won it, but I know it went to Josh Allen. But if he had a defense, if they could slow other people down or even stop them, which I think is a tall task, then the Cincinnati Bengals would have had some of the opportunity. So that's an uphill climb for them. And just think about it, if you're Joe Burrow, you go into every single game, no matter who is the opposite quarterback across the field, you're saying that you have to outscore them for 17 weeks. You know how difficult that is? Very difficult. But we'll see what happens. But I'm expecting big fantasy numbers, even though I'm not expecting the Cincinnati Bengals to kind of be in that back half of the season where we're going, oh, wow, look at those Bengals. Who they? We're not going to be saying who they. We're going to be saying,
Well,
who the hell is that damn defense? That's what we're going to say.
yeah. I just learned that Nick had the number 1 overall pick in his fantasy draft, so we're pulling for Jamar Chase for you this year, Nick. I'm thrilled. I couldn't be more excited for you. But yeah, like you talk about that trio in particular. And this now comes down to the boring money part of the discussion. Never in NFL history have 3 players at quarterback, receiver, and receiver accounted for as much of the salary cap as they are, roughly 30%. And this is year 1, essentially, for T. Higgins and for Jamar Chase. So it's only going to get more and more expensive. I understand the cap is going to grow, but we've never seen a team built this way compete and win for Super Bowls. So it's created friction, and it's caused the team to pull their purse strings in other areas. Like, why, for a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl with one of the elite quarterbacks, waiting 4 months to give their star defensive end a $14 million raise that he's, I get it. They signed him to a contract. He's outperformed the contract. Why is it that they are going to create incident clauses in the rookie's Shamar Stewart's contract before he can even get on the football field? Why are they drafting a project at defensive end who had 4.5 career sacks in college when they need players that can help them win now? The whole infrastructure of the front office, which is like 3 guys and Mike Brown in the first place, doesn't seem to align with what this team needs to do. And it's to get their players in-house, to keep them there, to draft well enough considering, their budget is tight all around the margins, and yet they're the only team that all had their original draft selections, didn't trade, didn't maneuver. They just liked the spots that they were in. Oh, good, the laundry's done. They just operate in these fine margins, and it almost makes it harder for the football team itself to meet those expectations that, rightfully so, the team and the fan base has had since they went to the Super Bowl a few years ago.
What you're essentially saying, in a nutshell, the Cincinnati Bengals ownership is cheap as hell. That's basically what you're saying, right? And
was I too long-winded?
Well, no, but that's. I mean, you were trying to make a case for them. You were trying to do right by them. But I was sitting there listening, like, why don't we just tell her how a TI is? They cheap as hell, right? Yeah, you spent a lot of money on the opposite side of the ball. You didn't do it for Trey Henderson. But this is an organization that has been known to cut corners, right? You talk about their front office. They're not willing to spend in the front office. So if you're not willing to spend in the front office to evaluate talent properly, at least you could pass the savings on to the players. But they can't even do that, Alex. Why do you think that they're going to constantly be bottom out? And I feel for T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. Well, let me take that back. No, I don't feel for them because they're getting paid goo gobs of money. And to me, they're going to have to use that money to drown their sorrows. So hopefully they can buy a whole bunch of things to make them feel better about their life and the place and the team that they're playing for, because they're not going to win a damn thing.
The Pittsburgh Steelers pride themselves on winning football games, and yet it seems like they haven't won a damn thing either. No playoff wins since what? I think the drought's long enough that kid would be old enough to go to middle school by now. I believe 2016, 2017, right around that margin. So is a winning season more important than any further success? You come to conflict with not having that success and yet having one of the most revered coaches in any sport in Mike Tomlin. And the infrastructure of that team is the best. The standard is the standard, as he said. And having 3 coaches over the last 60 years, that is certainly a standard in and of itself. I'm not going to be calling for Mike Tomlin's job, but many people might be if a team led by Aaron Rodgers doesn't put them over the hill, considering the types of seasons that they put together, 9 wins with the quarterback play that they've had and have been unable to fulfill since Ben Roethlisberger hung it up.
Well, Alex, this is a byproduct of success. This is something that most NFL teams would love to say, that over so many decades, you've only had 3 head coaches. And to be fair to Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season. Now, the big knock is winning a playoff game. That is one of the issues. But I'm sure if you asked around the league, you asked a couple of fans, would you want to be in Mike Tomlin's shoes? Would you want to be a Steelers fan? They would say yes. You know why? Because so many teams don't make the playoffs. They're not mainstays, and they're 2 teams that we constantly see mainstays in the playoffs, but they end up beating each other up. That's the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? So all this nonsense, and I heard it during the offseason, trade Mike Tomlin, he's run its course and all of this. It's just like, no. There's 32 teams, and Pittsburgh has one of those coaches.
I think there'd be at least 30, maybe 25 teams at the least that'd be calling for Mike Tomlin, would rather be there.
Yes, and it's just like, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that the Rooneys thought about trading Mike Tomlin, which we've seen coaches traded before, John Gruden being one of them. How many other teams you would think that would be standing in the corner going, ooh, us, pick us, because that's the type of culture he brings. Now, the part that is really difficult for the Steelers is that there's 2 things that they typically do well: play great defense and run the ball. And when they have not progressed past the first round of the playoffs, that's been the issues. They didn't run the ball that well. That's why Najee Harris is now a member of the LA Chargers, right? Mm-hmm. And they didn't play great defense, right? When you look at some of the players that they have, they're getting older. They traded Minka Fitzpatrick, like I said earlier, for
Jalen Ramsey. That was kind of crazy, and to bring Jonnu Smith in as well. That was kind of the trade that I don't want to say sent like shockwaves or this is incredible, but it's rare that we see the player-for-player type of trades. I mean, talk about a defense that shifts from having a center field type of safety for an outside shut at one point of his career and could still be there a shutdown corner. How does that philosophy?
No, not shut down. No.
I said at one point of his career.
Okay. Well, having Jalen Ramsey in the building, like they wanted more of a veteran presence, and they felt as though, well, Jalen Ramsey can't run like he used to. So let's move him into the slot. He's played better in the slot position. Now, Jalen Ramsey is not known for being a physical corner, but it is seen from the preseason standpoint by him wearing the silver, not the silver and black, but the gold and black, and wearing the black visor. Yeah. Now he is essentially, starting to embody and take on everything that the Pittsburgh defense actually stood for, even though that's not a natural part of who he is as a player. So I'm interested to see, is this fact or fiction, or do we have to pull back the curtain and really see who Jalen Ramsey really is? Because If I'm playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers and he's on the field, we're going to run at him. We're going to wear him down. But the
Hmm.
one thing that we know about Mike Tomlin, they're going to be physical up front. This is going to be a team that is going to be in your face. They're going to be well coached. They're going to be really aggressive. But the question is, can they bring it together? But I do like the fact that you got DK Metcalf matched up with Aaron Rodgers. And this is kind of Aaron Rodgers' last run, is it not?
Yeah, right. I mean, the tenure with the Jets was definitely a disappointment. It would be the understatement of the century. And honestly, I'm kind of disappointed with the kind of alignment that they have with Rodgers and DK Metcalf. So they send George Pickens to Dallas. They acquire DK Metcalf from Seattle and ultimately make him a top five paid receiver, despite the guys around him and the type of success that they had is something that he's still kind of looking for. Um, and you can picture Mr. Big Chest. Well, I was AB, which he has his own concerns. But the guy with the biggest chest at the receiver position, DK Metcalf, not as physical of a player as he would look. And the one thing for me is that his contested catch rate was lower than George Pickens last year, and Pickens wasn't really good either, despite all those acrobatic sideline catches. So we're looking for him to go up and get the football. First, he's got to create some separation, which he can do. But at that size and physicality, that back shoulder throw that Aaron Rodgers has been throwing for 20 years, that doesn't necessarily align with DK Metcalf's strengths from his early years in the NFL. So if that's not something that they've improved upon, I just don't know if it's a clear-cut fit for that offense, other than, of course, running the ball and working those multiple tight ends, that 12 personnel that Arthur Smith just loves.
Well, Jalen Warren just got paid a significant amount of coin. So they're
Hmm.
going to lean heavily on him. Not-
Yep, and they got the third-round rookie Caleb Johnson as
yeah,
well. Two different
two,
runners. I
two
think,
different runners.
Rogers' best friend, I think Warren being Rogers' best friend because he's the better pass catcher and, more importantly for him,
Well,
blocker.
once again, that goes back to what Aaron Rodgers had with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Jones, right? A guy who you could run swing routes with, you could dump it off and check it down and run, plays in the flat or even screen plays. And Jalen Warren is not a big guy, but he's still a little thick and he is still a load. And when you get behind that offensive line and you have accurate pass throwing ability, then that changes a lot of things for Jalen Warren as far as him receiving his passes. But with Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers has been through a lot since those days with the Packers. And he really has to prove himself. Even so much so that Terry Bradshaw, a Steelers legend, has had some, let's just say, some interesting things to say about Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers is great.
And my home state and my son's home state of California
Yeah.
calls us a bunch of bark chewers.
Well, you know what? Aaron has his own unique way of speaking, his own unique way of dealing with things. And I really want to see if Aaron can really revitalize this Pittsburgh Steelers organization because they've been lying dormant ever since, you think about Ben Roethlisberger lacing them up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been somewhat of an issue, but it's going to be really interesting because you have a guy in Aaron Rodgers who loves to do the things his way. How is that going
Yeah.
to work with Arthur Smith? And more importantly, how is Mike Tomlin going to handle that when he is usually the leader of men and not allowing his quarterbacks to dictate what he does as a head coach?
Yeah, a completely different outlook and look. They need each other, right? Aaron Rodgers is kind of, as you said, on his last ride after the last team he had full control of. Those New York Jets just gave him the keys and he drove that car into a ditch. So Pittsburgh, right, they can push the culture, but Mike Tomlin needs an Aaron Rodgers because he's more likely to get them over the top than Mason Rudolph was or Russell Wilson a year ago. So it just sort of leaves us with Nick, maybe it's serendipitous, I'm not sure. We've broken down 31 teams, and the team that we are about to do, 32nd, maybe the 32nd best team in the National Football League. And those Cleveland Browns, Nick, they're carrying four quarterbacks. Myles Garrett is still there, thank goodness for that, but it is just bleak. And maybe we're a year, maybe 2 years ahead of talking about the actual potential for this team, but let's start we'll get the Colorado stuff out of the way. Shador Sanders, I think, gets certain exceptions as ahead of what a fourth string quarterback normally would, but he needs that time to develop. Second, they traded out of the opportunity to select his former running mate in Travis Hunter. Uh, it's going to reverberate one way or another whether they made that right decision based on the draft capital they picked up or the type of player he becomes in Jacksonville. So as far as Cleveland and that CU Buffs connection, Nick, how do you see what they did in the draft specifically with giving up that second overall pick and then taking Shador Sanders as the second rookie quarterback, now fourth string on their depth chart?
You always wonder when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, what are they really thinking? What's the long term and the short term plans? Because when they draft, it leaves you scratching their head. Like you said, it was a team that has four quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson is on the roster. They're paying him, but let's be totally honest, he's never going to lace it up for the Cleveland Browns again.
No.
And starting a season with old man Joe Flacco, listen, the reason they did that because Flacco was able to lead them to the playoffs. But we saw how that ended playing against a younger Houston Texans team. So the fate of this team lies right now in the two younger quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders, which I think, well, for Shador, obviously, just like Dylan and just like any other quarterback, they still have a lot to learn. But I still think that Shador really showed who he was as a player. And I didn't think that he really got the benefit of the doubt in that last preseason game. So that's a whole nother conversation that we can have. But
yeah, this isn't the tinfoil podcast.
Yeah.
You're not setting up to fail or any of that.
Yeah, so when you think about the Cleveland Browns, there's a lot to like about this team because you want to root for them as an underdog and hope that they finally get there. But it's a tough hill to climb considering the fact of the division they're in, let alone the conference. And they got talent. I mean, there's talent around Joe Flacco. You got Jerry Jeudy. You got David Njoku. Right now, the guy that I was hoping to see is Quinshon Junkins, right? And we don't know when we're going to see him. And when we do, that could be a game changer for them, especially after losing a guy like Nick Chubb. But that Cleveland is a team that they're at the bottom, and right now I see them remaining at the bottom.
I do as well, and for all the talk of an Ivy front office of Andrew Berry and Paul D. Podesta, I mean the decision making just time and time again. And look, I'm not going to blame them for Judkins in particular, but they bring in Isaiah Bond afterwards. The allegation is of Deshaun Watson, and they say this is the guy. We're going to make the highest paid player in NFL history, the most guaranteed money that will get 31 other organizations upset at us. It's hard, and it was I mentioned the Travis Hunter deal at first because they think they're smarter than everybody, and I get it. Like maybe they're not ready to fully employ a Travis Hunter or are afraid to use him on both sides of the field. I'm not entirely sure what the thought process is, but to move on from the choice of taking a guy who just loves football and is completely about it, I feel a certain type of way about it. I love some of the picks that they made outside of Judkins. I mean, Schlesinger, who went the top of the second round with that pick they got from Jacksonville. Great kid out of UCLA who scratched and clawed and might be wearing a green dot within the next year or so. It's kind of the same conversation we had with the Patriots. It's how many guys do they have on this roster that can stick around for the long term? Because the reality is, you mentioned Njoku and Jerry Jeudy, and on the defensive side, it's Myles Garrett, it's Denzel Ward. These are guys that are not going to be here when the rest of the roster is ready to go. I mean, it's an aging offensive line that are dealing with their injuries. It's just they can't have one foot in the present while having one foot in the future. They need to find a quarterback. I think they drafted two that could be a backup, but 2 first-round picks in the 2026 draft, they're going to go quarterback hunting. Just the roster that we see now is not the one that's going to matter when they're going to compete for games 2 or 3 years from now. And it's hard to say because I love Njoku. I mean, Jerry Jeudy revitalizing his career, catching balls from Jameis Winston, that's great. But it doesn't ultimately matter for the future of this franchise, Nick.
No, well, it does because the present is going to set up the future. And what I mean by that is if these guys go out there and guys who may be on expiring deals in the next couple of years see that the team is moving in the right direction and they're trying to make the right decisions in the front office, that's how you get guys to extend their contracts. And we haven't really seen that. Cleveland has become one of those places where careers go to die. It was that way when I played, and nothing has really changed. Like you mentioned the fact that they have 2 first-round picks, right? And they kind of passed up on, a guy like Travis Hunter. I can understand that frame of mind because being in that position to be able to get somewhat of a haul for a player like that, yeah, you make that move to make your team better with the hopes of maybe one of those first-round draft choices, maybe you can swap with someone else and add more picks because that's what it's going to take to build this team. Now, I mean, really quickly talking about Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, I don't think these 2 quarterbacks are destined to just be viewed as being backup quarterbacks. I don't look at it that way because to me, everyone had a jumping off point. Even your favorite quarterback, Tom Brady, was drafted in the 6th round, and no one thought that he would actually do what he did. But he was surrounded by a veteran group of players on the defensive side of the ball. And there was a sprinkle of a couple of players here and there on the offensive side of the ball. And the play calling from one Josh McDaniels and so many others helped Tom Brady. So the same can happen with these 2 players. It's all about building from the ground up. Right now, Cleveland, as bad as they seem right now, and the way I look at them as being a bottom feeder, their future looks bright if they make the right decision. And I say if in capital letters because this is an organization that has proven when they have the picks, they can't make the right damn pick.
Yep, exactly. And the type of people they bring around the organization, too, I already touched on that. But that's, we'll be able to watch that play out during the season. These AFC North games, these black and blue games, as you put it, are going to be some of the best to watch. And, hey, that's 32 teams, Nick. You ready for some football?
I am ready. You see these helmets behind me. Hey, man, don't get me started. I mean, luckily you're not here, man. I start smelling the fresh scent of that grass, man. I throw that helmet off, man, and I go berserk.
You heard it. You heard it from Nick. We're going to do our opening night episode. Nick's going to be throwing on a helmet. I got to do something to match that type of energy. He's Nick Ferguson, 10 years in the NFL as a safety. You can catch him at @NickFerguson_25. Throughout the season, I mean, we're going to be here. We are those guys. You see these guys over there doing what they're doing? How about those guys? All season long, you catch us. We'll be breaking down film, having some fun along the way, and talking about what needs to be talked about. So, Nick, hey, when I see you again, we're going to be talking about actual smell the green grass NFL football. What do you have to say for the people?
Football is here. Let's go.
What? Whoa!
Let's go.